Andre Wade was 41 years old, and until that Friday evening, he believed his marriage was simply going through a quiet season. He was a self-made restaurateur who had spent 15 years building an empire nobody knew was his. No press releases, no public records, no fanfare. Just discipline, patience, and a 5-star restaurant in the heart of the city that bore his fingerprints on everything except the paperwork. That night, his floor manager pulled him aside before he could reach the kitchen. His wife was seated at table 41, in a red dress he had never seen before, across from a man who had ordered the tasting menu, ordered the wine pairing, and was touching her hand like he had already won something. Andre stood at that security monitor for exactly 4 minutes. Then he straightened his jacket and walked onto his own dining room floor. What he did next would cost them both everything they thought they had secured, but neither of them saw it coming. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The commissary kitchen smelled like roasted garlic and clean steel. Andre Wade moved through it the way he moved through everything, unhurried, precise, his eyes catching details that other people missed. A prep container stacked at the wrong angle, a cooler door that wasn't quite sealed, a new hire who had trimmed the herbs correctly but left the stems too long. He said nothing about that last one. He just picked up a stem, held it next to the correct length, set it down beside the kid's cutting board, and moved on. The kid would figure it out. That was how Andre taught. Not with speeches, with presence. The kitchen was 3,000 square feet of organized hustle, 6 prep stations, 2 walk-in coolers, a blast chiller that had cost more than his first car, and a loading dock that took in deliveries 6 mornings a week. This was where the real work happened. Not at Verse, with its low lighting and $40 plates. Here, in this loud, fluorescent room that smelled like real food and real labor. He had built it from nothing. Not from a loan his parents co-signed, not from a trust fund or an inheritance, from 15 years of double shifts, saved wages, and decisions that kept him up at night until they didn't anymore. A framed photo hung near the back office door. His grandmother Gwen's kitchen, small, yellow-walled, a cast-iron skillet hanging above the stove. He had taken the photo himself years ago on a disposable camera. It was the first thing he'd hung when he opened this place. Every morning it reminded him where cooking actually came from. He settled at the desk in his back office and pulled up the invoice stack. Thursday nights were for numbers. He went through them the same way he prepped a plate, methodically, looking for anything that was off. A produce supplier had bumped their delivery fee by 4% without notice. He flagged it. He would call them in the morning, calmly, and they would reverse it. They always did. People who did business with Andre Wade tended to stay in line, not because he was loud about it, but because he paid on time, treated their drivers with respect, and they knew he was paying attention. His operations manager, a tall woman named Priya, knocked on the open door. Inventory counts done. We're good on dry storage. Protein order for the weekend catering job is confirmed. University or hospital? Andre asked without looking up. University. The alumni dinner. He nodded. Make sure the dietary restriction list goes to Marcus tonight, not tomorrow morning. He needs the full window to prep. Already sent. Good. She left. He went back to the invoices. This was his empire, not a loud one. Not the kind that put his face on billboards or got him quoted in business magazines under his full name. By design, Andre Wade appeared almost nowhere on paper. The commissary operated under one LLC, Verse under another, Crestline Hospitality Group. The 3 commercial properties he owned were held in a family trust, with his brother Curtis listed as property manager. His grandmother had taught him that a long time ago, sitting in that yellow kitchen, stirring a pot of something that filled the whole house. Real power doesn't announce itself. He believed that completely. He had built his whole life around it. At 6:48 he picked up his phone and called Diane. It rang 4 times. "Hey!" Her voice was even, professional, almost, the way she answered work calls. "Hey," he said. "I'm wrapping up here. Thought I'd see if you wanted me to pick something up on the way home. Or I can cook." A brief pause. "I actually have a thing tonight. Late work function. Don't wait up." "What kind of function?" "HR leadership dinner. New VP is in from the regional office." "Okay," he said. "You eat yet?" "I'll eat there. It's fine." "All right. Don't make a big thing of it," she added, though he hadn't made anything at all. "I'm not," he said. "Just asking." She said goodbye, and the call ended. He looked at the phone for a moment, then set it face down on the desk. He went to his own cooler, the one in the back corner of the commissary, where he kept things separate from inventory, and pulled out a container of braised short rib he'd made Tuesday. He heated it on the stovetop in the small side kitchen, added a spoonful of the pan sauce, let it come back to temperature properly. He ate standing at the counter, alone, reading over weekend schedules between bites. The food was excellent. He had made sure of that. This was the part he didn't examine too closely. Eating alone, the quiet of the kitchen after the staff had gone home, the particular shape of a Thursday night that had started to look a lot like every other night. It didn't have a name yet, this feeling. He hadn't given it one. He just moved through it the way he moved through everything. He washed his dish, dried it, put it back exactly where it belonged. He locked up at 8:30. The city spread out ahead of him as he pulled onto the main road. Lights on glass, traffic thinning, the kind of Thursday night that blurred into Friday without ceremony. The car was quiet, heavier than it should have been for a man driving home alone. He didn't turn on the radio. Verse didn't look like something Andre Wade built. That was the point. From the outside, it was a converted brick building on a downtown corner. Warm light bleeding through tall windows, a simple brass sign above the door that said nothing except the name. No stars listed, no awards mentioned. The kind of restraint that told people who knew things exactly what kind of place it was. Inside, it was all dark wood and candlelight, and the kind of quiet that expensive restaurants work very hard to manufacture. 44 covers. A tasting menu that changed with the season. A sommelier named David, who had turned down 2 other offers to stay. The kind of room where people came to mark the moments of their lives. Engagements, anniversaries, promotions, goodbyes. Andre came in through the back, as always. He used his key on the service entrance off the alley, nodded to the dishwasher running a full rack near the door, and moved down the narrow corridor toward the kitchen. The smell hit him first. Something with brown butter and fresh thyme. Something else underneath it. Rich and slow. Marcus was running a good service. He could tell just from the air. He hadn't made it to the kitchen door. Chef. The voice belonged to Raymond, his floor manager, a precise, composed man who had worked for Andre for 6 years and rarely showed anything on his face that wasn't meant to be there. But tonight, his face was doing something uncomfortable, something that sat between apology and dread. Andre stopped. "What is it?" Raymond didn't look away, which Andre respected. "Your wife is here. Front of house." A brief pause. Table 41. The corridor was quiet except for the distant rhythm of the kitchen. Andre didn't move. He didn't say anything. He just stood there for one full breath, absorbing it. "She came in about 40 minutes ago," Raymond said, keeping his voice low and level. "I didn't know whether to call you or—" "You did right," Andre said. His voice was steady. "Show me the monitor." The security monitor was mounted in the small alcove off the main kitchen, a 4-panel screen fed by cameras covering the dining room, bar, entry, and back corridor. Andre had insisted on it 3 years ago after a liability incident near the bar. At the time, Nadine had told him it was a smart move. He hadn't known how right she was. He found Diane on panel 2. She was at table 41, a corner two top near the window, the best seat in the room, the one Raymond reserved for guests who either called ahead or clearly knew what they were about. She was wearing a red dress, not the kind of red that was dark or safe. A real red, bright and deliberate, with a neckline that wasn't anything she would have worn to a work function. He had never seen that dress before. Across from her sat a man Andre didn't recognize. He was somewhere in his mid-40s, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that fit the way money fits, not tailored to show off, tailored to confirm. He had the ease of a man who had been comfortable in rooms like this his whole life. He was currently doing the thing with the sommelier, the performance of it, the slight lean back, the finger tracing the wine list, the gesture of a man who wanted his companion to notice how naturally he moved through expensive spaces. Diane was watching him with a small smile, the kind she used when she was genuinely pleased. "Scott," said something. She laughed. He reached across the table and rested his hand over hers. Andre watched the monitor. He counted the seconds without meaning to. 1 minute passed, then 2. By the third minute, he had seen enough to understand the full shape of what he was looking at. This was not new. The ease between them, the particular comfort of two people who had been comfortable together for a long time, wasn't something you built over weeks. You could see the history in it, the way she tilted her head when he spoke, the way he touched her hand without thinking about it, the way you only touch someone when you've stopped being careful. 4 minutes. He stepped back from the monitor. "Raymond." His voice was the same as it always was. That was the thing Raymond would remember later, that it didn't change at all. Comp their first course. Full VIP protocol. Tell the floor captain table 41 gets whatever they want. He straightened his jacket. A small motion, precise, like a man setting a plate before it goes to the dining room. "No bill presented until I authorize it personally." Raymond nodded once. "Understood." Andre moved out of the alcove. He passed the line without stopping, moved through the swing door, and stepped into the warm, low light of the dining room. The floor was full. The room was doing what it was built to do, holding people inside a version of the evening that felt like more than an ordinary night. Candlelight caught the edges of wine glasses. Silverware clicked softly against plates. Someone near the bar was laughing at exactly the right volume. Andre crossed the floor unhurried, his hands loose at his sides. He stopped at table 41. Diane looked up. The color left her face so fast it was almost like watching something physical, like a tide going out all at once. Scott Pritchard was mid-sentence when Andre stopped at the table. He had been saying something to Diane, leaning forward, making a point with his hands the way men do when they want to look passionate about something. But the words died when he registered the figure standing at the edge of their table. He looked up. Then he sat back slowly, the way a man does when he's recalibrating. Diane hadn't moved. She looked like she'd forgotten how. Andre smiled. It was warm and unhurried, and reached his eyes without any effort at all. "Diane." His voice was easy, conversational. The voice of a man who had just spotted a familiar face across a restaurant. Nothing more, nothing less. "I didn't know you were coming in tonight." She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Andre had already turned to Scott, his right hand extended. Andre Wade. A clean, firm handshake. "I own this restaurant." Something moved behind Scott's eyes. A fast recalculation. He covered it quickly. Andre gave him credit for that, and matched the handshake with a smile that landed about a half-second late. "Scott Pritchard." His voice was smooth, practiced. The voice of a man used to being the most confident person in a room. "Hell of a place you have here." "Thank you," Andre said. Simple, no addition. He pulled out the empty chair at the side of the table, not Diane's chair, not Scott's, the neutral one, and sat at its edge with the relaxed posture of a man checking in on a table he cared about. Just a host, just the owner making his rounds. How's the service been tonight? Raymond taking care of you? Absolutely, Scott said. He was finding his footing now, leaning into the charm that was clearly his most reliable tool. First course was incredible. We were just saying, the scallops, right? The scallop dish? Brown butter, cauliflower, a little cured roe, Andre said. Marcus has been dialing that one in for 3 weeks. It shows. Scott nodded. The picture of a man at ease. You've got something really special here, man. I appreciate that. Diane had still not said a single word. Her hands were in her lap. She was watching Andre the way you watch something you can't fully predict. Carefully, waiting. Andre didn't look at her the way she expected. He looked at her the way he would look at any guest. Pleasant, attentive, completely unreadable. You both enjoy the rest of your evening, he said. He stood from the chair with the same ease he had sat in it. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and produced a business card. Thick stock, embossed lettering. He set it on the table between them, face down. If you need anything at all, have Raymond find me. He didn't wait for a response. He turned and walked back across the dining room at the same unhurried pace, hands loose at his sides, nodding once to the floor captain near the bar without breaking stride. The back office was small. A desk, a lamp, a filing cabinet, and a framed photo on the wall of a woman in an apron standing in a narrow kitchen. Gwen Wade, 30 years younger, laughing at something just off camera. Andre closed the door behind him. He stood in the middle of the room for a long moment. Then he pulled out the chair and sat down. The adrenaline was breaking. He could feel it. The slow, heavy crash of it, moving through his chest like cold water, filling a space that had just been emptied out. His hands were on the desk, and they were perfectly still. But something behind his ribs was not still at all. It was the red dress. It was the way Scott's hand had covered hers. It was 3 years of work functions and long nights and dinners he had eaten alone without pressing her, because he had respected her, because he was the kind of man who gave people room. He breathed in. He breathed out. He picked up his phone. Curtis answered on the second ring. Hey, I need you available this weekend. Andre kept his voice level. Don't ask questions yet. A pause. Okay, Curtis said. Just that. He knew his brother well enough to know when to wait. Andre hung up. He scrolled to the next name and called Nadine. She answered the way she always did. Direct, no preamble. Pull up the full asset inventory, Andre said. All of it. I want to know exactly where everything stands. Legally. Every LLC, every trust, every account. A brief silence. When Nadine spoke, her voice was the same steady instrument it always was. I'll have it ready. Thank you. He ended the call and sat for a moment longer in the small office with his grandmother's photo on the wall, the faint sounds of the kitchen pressing through the door, the low percussion of a Friday service running clean and well. Then he stood, straightened his jacket, and walked out. The house was dark when he pulled in. He moved through it without turning on lights, undressed quietly in the bathroom, and got into bed. He was on his side, facing the window, when he heard Diane's key in the door 40 minutes later. Her footsteps on the stairs, the soft sound of her getting ready for bed in the bathroom down the hall. She came in. She got into her side without a word. He said nothing. The room was dark and completely silent. Andre lay still, eyes open, and began to think. Diane was gone before 7. Andre heard her. He'd been awake since 5, lying still in the gray morning quiet, listening to the house breathe. He heard her alarm, heard the muffled sounds of her moving through the bathroom, her closet, the hallway. The front door opened and closed with a soft, careful click. The click of someone trying not to disturb anything. He waited 10 more minutes. Then he got up. The coffee maker gurgled and hissed, while Andre stood at the kitchen window in an old sweatshirt and sweatpants, watching a neighbor walk a dog down the empty street below. The sky was the flat, pale gray of early November. Nothing dramatic, just cold light coming in slow. He poured his cup. He sat down at the kitchen table. He opened his laptop. He did not feel frantic. He did not feel the jagged, erratic energy of a man acting from pain. What he felt was quieter than that, and colder. It was the feeling he got when a kitchen was producing wrong, and he had to find the problem before the dinner service started. Methodical, focused, emotionally still. He started with what he knew. He opened their shared email account, a household account they'd set up years ago for utilities and joint subscriptions. He wasn't looking for anything specific. He was just looking. The way a builder looks at a wall before he decides whether to trust it. He almost missed it. Buried under 3 years of promotional emails and subscription confirmations was a forwarded receipt, a hotel loyalty program, a welcome message from the rewards account, sent to this address by mistake, probably when Diane was setting it up on her phone and hit the wrong saved address. She must have deleted it from her side. She had not known he could still see it on his. He clicked it open. The account was in her name alone. Applied for 38 months ago. The welcome email listed a membership number and a customer service link. Andre wrote down the membership number on the notepad beside his laptop. Then he opened the hotel chain's website. He couldn't access her account directly. He didn't need to. What he needed was already in front of him. He pulled up his own calendar, 3 years of it. Work trips Diane had taken, conferences she had mentioned, nights she had stayed late and then stayed later. He had the dates because he was the kind of man who paid attention to his schedule, and their schedules had been shared in a joint calendar app since their 2nd year of marriage. He started cross-referencing. October, 3 years ago. Diane at an HR leadership conference in Atlanta. 4 nights. Andre remembered because he'd offered to drive her to the airport, and she'd said her colleague was picking her up. He searched the hotel name from the rewards welcome email against that same October. The chain had a property in Atlanta. He found the address and pulled up the hotel's website, then navigated to a third-party travel site that showed customer photos and confirmed the property. He sat back. The HR conference that October had been held at a convention center on the north side of the city. He found the conference program archived online. The host hotel, the hotel where her company had blocked rooms, was a Marriott on Peachtree. The hotel where her rewards account was registered was 12 miles away. He wrote that down too. He went through 4 more trips the same way. Slow, careful, checking each one against public records and whatever he could find. 2 of them didn't line up. 1 barely did. The 4th one, a supposed weekend conference in Charlotte 14 months ago, showed no record of any HR conference of that kind in Charlotte that entire month. He checked 3 different sources. He picked up his phone and called Curtis. Curtis answered on the first ring this time. "Talk to me." 18 months ago, Andre said. "The mixed-use building on Carver. You told me once you saw a woman there you didn't recognize. Black woman, late 30s, professional. You mentioned it because she knew the access code to the 2nd floor." A pause. He could hear Curtis pulling the memory up. "Yeah," Curtis said slowly. "Yeah, I remember that. I figured she was one of the tenant's guests or something. I meant to mention it to you, and then I forgot." "Why?" Andre said. "What was she wearing?" "What?" "Humor me." Another pause. "Some kind of coat. Dark. Nice coat. Heels." Curtis's voice shifted. "Andre, what's going on?" "She'd never been to that building," Andre said, according to her. The silence on the other end of the line was not long, but it landed heavy. "How long?" Curtis asked. His voice had dropped. 3 years. Andre looked at the notepad in front of him. The dates, the hotel names, the gaps where her explanations should have been and weren't. "It's not a mistake, Curtis. It's not something that happened and got out of hand. She built something. She ran it parallel to this whole life for 3 years, and she managed it the way she manages everything, carefully. Curtis said nothing for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was tight and low. "Tell me what you need." "Not yet," Andre said. "I'll call you tomorrow." He hung up. He sat in the quiet kitchen for a long time, his coffee going cold beside the laptop, the notepad full of dates and numbers that told a story no one had given him permission to know. Then he closed the laptop. He picked up his phone and called Nadine. "Sunday," he said when she answered. "Can you meet?" "Name the time," she said. Nadine's office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown that had clean lines and no wasted space, exactly like the woman who worked in it. Andre arrived at 2 in the afternoon. The receptionist showed him back without asking his name. Nadine was already at her conference table when he walked in. 4 folders laid out in a row. A yellow legal pad with her handwriting down the left margin. A second cup of coffee beside the one she was drinking. Black, no sugar, because she had known him long enough to know how he took it. "Sit," she said. He sat. She did not ask him how he was doing. He appreciated that. "I started pulling the full inventory Friday night," she said, opening the first folder. "All 4 LLCs, the family holding company, both trusts. Everything is where it should be. Nothing has been touched." She slid the first sheet toward him, a clean summary. Asset columns on the left, legal structures on the right. The commissary kitchen. Verse. The 3 commercial properties, including the one on Carver. The catering contracts. All of it sits behind walls Diane's attorney will have to work very hard to see through, and only if they know what they're looking for. Andre looked at the sheet. He nodded. "Now," Nadine said. She folded her hands on the table. "I need to tell you something else." He looked up. She held his gaze. 6 months ago, Diane consulted a divorce attorney, Lawrence Briggs, family law, downtown. He's competent, but not exceptional. She paused. "I have a contact in the legal community. The information came through professional channels, and it's verifiable." She sat down with Briggs in late April. She went alone. The kitchen window that morning, the cold gray sky, the coffee going cold beside his laptop. Andre had thought he was running down the timeline of an affair. He had not fully accounted for the possibility that the timeline had a different destination. He sat with it. 6 months, he said. Yes. He looked at the legal pad in front of her. She knew I was leveraging the Hartwell and DeKalb properties to acquire the Meridian building. I told her that in February. Nadine nodded slowly. From where she was sitting, from what she could see of your finances, leveraging 2 properties at once would look like overextension. It would look like you were stretched. She was waiting for that window, Andre said. That's my read, Nadine said. She wasn't planning to leave in a crisis. She was waiting for a moment when she believed you were most exposed, when a divorce settlement would catch you off balance. She let that land without decoration. She was going to initiate, on her timeline, when she thought your hands were full. The room was quiet. Outside, 14 floors down, the city moved at its regular pace. Cars and foot traffic, and the low, constant sound of a place that did not pause for anyone's private reckoning. Andre thought about February. He had told Diane about the Meridian acquisition over dinner. He remembered the dinner clearly now. She had asked a few questions, more than usual, and he had been glad for the interest. He had thought she was engaging with his work. He had been grateful. He picked up his coffee cup. He set it down, without drinking. Okay, he said. He called Curtis from the parking garage before he started the car. He laid it out clean and factual, the way he'd laid out the hotel records that morning. The attorney consultation, the timeline, the February conversation about the Meridian acquisition, and what Diane had done with that information. Curtis was quiet through all of it. Then he was not quiet. 3 years. His voice came through the phone like something with pressure behind it. She's sitting with Briggs in April. She's walking through your building on Carver. She's running a whole second life. And she's just waiting for you to be—" He stopped, started again. "Andre, what she did. I want to—" "No," Andre said. "I'm just saying—" "Curtis." Andre's voice was even, not cold, just flat and certain, the way a wall is certain. No noise, not yet. A long exhale on the other end. Then, "Okay. Tomorrow," Andre said. "We meet with Nadine together, all three of us. I'll explain everything then." He hung up. He sat in the dim concrete quiet of the parking garage for a moment. Then he started the car. Gwen lived 20 minutes away, in the same house she had lived in for 31 years. The porch light was already on when Andre pulled up, even though it was barely 5 o'clock. She always kept the porch light on. She opened the door before he knocked. She looked at his face. She did not say anything about what she saw there. She just stepped back and let him in. The house smelled like it always smelled. Something warm, something with onion in it, the particular wood and fabric smell of a home that had been cared for a long time. She put the kettle on without asking. He sat at her kitchen table. The same chairs. The same window above the sink that looked out on the narrow backyard with the garden she kept through spring and summer. She brought the tea. She sat across from him. He didn't tell her everything. He told her enough. She listened without interrupting, her hands folded around her own cup, her eyes steady on his face the whole time. When he finished, the kitchen was quiet. Gwen looked at him for a long moment. "Whatever it is," she said, "don't let it make you small." Her voice was unhurried, certain. "You were never built for small." Andre looked at his cup. He sat with that for a long time. The folders from Saturday were still on the conference table. Nadine had added more overnight. Andre counted 6 stacks before he sat down. Curtis pulled out the chair beside him, dropped his jacket over the back, and looked at the spread, the way a man looks at something that is bigger than he expected it to be. "All of this is his?" Curtis said. "All of this is his," Nadine said. She was already standing at the head of the table, legal pad in hand. She did not say it with pride or drama. She said it the way you state the weather. Curtis looked at Andre. Andre said nothing. He turned over the top page of the nearest folder and began to read. Nadine walked them through it methodically, starting from the outside and working in. The outermost layer was the simplest, verse, publicly operated by Crestline Hospitality Group LLC. Andre's name appeared nowhere on any public-facing document. His role was listed internally as silent partner and culinary consultant, identified only by initials on operational paperwork. Diane knew he had a financial interest in a restaurant. She did not know the depth of it, and she had never asked in a way that suggested she wanted to. Below that was the commissary kitchen, held under a separate LLC, AW Commercial Kitchen Partners. Below that, the 3 commercial properties, each sitting inside its own entity under the family holding company, Crestline Capital Group. Curtis was listed as a secondary stakeholder in the holding company, which Nadine had structured that way deliberately from the beginning. "Which means," Nadine said, capping her pen, "that a significant portion of Andre's real estate portfolio has a co-ownership structure with a non-spouse party, established years before any divorce filing, all of it properly disclosed to the IRS, all of it legitimate." She looked across the table at both of them. Diane's attorney, Lawrence Briggs, is working from what Diane told him. Diane's picture of Andre's finances is based on what she saw inside this marriage. Joint accounts, his stated income, the house. She paused. She did not see the rest. Curtis leaned back in his chair. "So Briggs doesn't know what he doesn't know. He hasn't dug," Nadine said. "And he won't know to dig unless someone tells him what to look for. Diane can't tell him what she doesn't know exists." The room was quiet for a moment. "There are also 2 property transfers," Nadine continued. She opened the second folder from the right and turned it toward Andre. These have been on my calendar for months. Routine business moves, repositioning two of the Crestline Capital assets into a revised holding structure. Nothing reactive, nothing new. I had planned to execute these in the fourth quarter. She set her pen flat on the table. I'm going to accelerate the timeline. Both transfers will be completed before any discovery process begins. Every document will show exactly what it is. A pre-planned business transaction with a paper trail going back 8 months. Clean, legal, and filed correctly. Andre reviewed the sheet. He looked up. How long? I can have both done by end of week, Nadine said. He nodded. Do it. Curtis had brought something of his own. He pulled out his phone, scrolled briefly, and set it on the table face up. Guy named Raymond Tate. He runs a mid-size commercial contracting outfit. Works adjacent to Scott's development circle. Not a friend of his, more like a competitor with a long memory. Curtis folded his hands. Raymond mentioned to me last month, before any of this, that Pritchard's been running personal expenses through his development company accounts. Hotels, travel that doesn't connect to any active project. Meals billed as client entertainment, with no matching contracts. He paused. Raymond's detail-oriented, the kind of man who notices things like that. Nadine looked at the phone, then at Andre. Andre did not react immediately. He picked up his coffee, drank, and set it down. Then he thought about February, the dinner, the questions Diane had asked, the way he had been grateful for her attention. Who's the right person to have that information? He asked Nadine. She considered for exactly 3 seconds. I know someone at the State Contractor Licensing Board, former client. He takes compliance concerns seriously. She paused. Unofficially. Pass it through the right channels, Andre said. Nadine made a single note on her legal pad. That was all. No speeches, no celebration. Just one small line of handwriting, and the quiet sound of something being set into motion. They finished by 4 in the afternoon. Nadine gathered the folders back into their stacks with the efficiency of a woman who had done this kind of work for 20 years and never once left a loose end on a table. Andre thanked her. He thanked Curtis. Curtis gripped his shoulder on the way out and didn't need to say anything else. Andre drove home through the gray Sunday light. He made a simple meal. Nothing elaborate, just rice and braised chicken the way Gwen had taught him. The kind of cooking that required attention, but not effort. He ate at the kitchen table. He washed his dish. He went to bed before 9 o'clock. And when sleep came, it came easily, and it stayed until morning. The coffee was already made when Diane came downstairs. Andre was dressed. Dark slacks, pressed shirt, jacket folded neatly over the back of his chair. He had been sitting at the kitchen table for 20 minutes with his hands wrapped around his mug, listening to the house, the heat clicking through the vents, a car passing outside, the particular quiet of a Tuesday morning that had no idea what it was carrying. He heard her on the stairs, heard her pause, just briefly, at the bottom. The way you pause when something in a room feels different, before you can name what it is. She came in wearing her robe, hair still down. She glanced at him. He looked up and gave her the same small nod he had given her 1,000 Tuesday mornings before this one. "Morning?" he said. "Morning," she said. He stood, poured a second mug, and set it on the table across from his. She sat down. She reached for the mug with both hands. That was when he slid the envelope across the table. It moved maybe 18 inches, stopped right in front of her coffee. Diane looked at it. She looked at his face. Andre sat back down. "Nadine filed this morning," he said. "On my behalf." The silence lasted about 4 seconds. Then Diane set her mug down carefully, the way a person sets something down when they are trying to slow their own pulse. She looked at the envelope again. She did not touch it. "Andre." Her voice was measured, controlled, the voice she used in professional settings when something had gone sideways and she needed to redirect. "This doesn't. We don't have to do this like this." He didn't answer. "We have 12 years," she said. "You don't make a decision like this without even talking to me. That's not who you are." "It's filed," he said. "Not cold, not sharp, just true." She shifted. He could see her recalibrating, cycling through her options the way he had watched her do in arguments over the years, trying each door until she found one that opened. "I have an attorney, too," she said. "Whatever Nadine told you, there are two sides to the finances in this marriage, and Lawrence's office can contact Nadine's office," Andre said. "That's the process." Her jaw tightened. "You're being rigid," she said. "You're hurt, and I understand that. But making decisions out of hurt is—" "I'm not hurt right now, Diane." He said it simply. "I'm organized." She looked at him for a long moment. Something moved across her face. Not guilt, not quite. More like the specific frustration of a person who has prepared for one version of a conversation and arrived to find a completely different one waiting. She tried the third door. "Can we please just sit down together? Without the attorneys, without the paperwork." Her voice softened. The professional edge came down. "Just us, like two people who know each other." He let her finish. "All communication goes through Nadine's office," he said. "That's not a negotiation. That's just how it's going to work. Andre, you can stay in the house through the process." He folded his hands on the table. "I have other arrangements. Take whatever time you need to get settled." Diane stared at him. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. He stood. He picked up his jacket from the back of the chair and pulled it on. He looked at her one last time. Not with anger, not with coldness. With the steady, clear eyes of a man who has already done his grieving in private, and arrived this morning at something that looked a lot like peace. "Enjoy your coffee," he said. He picked up his keys from the counter and walked out. She didn't move for a long time after the front door closed. She sat there in her robe, both hands around the mug, the envelope sitting in front of her where he'd placed it. She could hear his car back out of the driveway. She could hear it fade down the street. She had a plan. She had always had a plan. The timing, the sequence. She had mapped it out over months, adjusted it, refined it. She was supposed to be the one who initiated. She was supposed to control when and how and from what position. Lawrence had told her that whoever filed first didn't necessarily have the advantage, but she knew better than that. The advantage wasn't legal. It was psychological. It was the feeling of being the one standing when the other person is still sitting down. She was sitting down. She pulled the envelope toward her slowly and looked at her own name printed on the front. Diane Renee Wade. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She didn't move immediately. It buzzed again. She got up, crossed the kitchen, and looked at the screen. "Scott." She answered. "Have you seen this?" His voice was different. The usual ease was gone, scraped out and replaced with something tighter. His name. "I looked him up last night." "Diane, the restaurant is his. All of it. The tasting menu, the whole—" He stopped. "There's a business profile. There are properties. I'm looking at 3 commercial buildings, a commissary operation, and that restaurant, and his name is—" "Scott." She pressed her eyes closed. "Did you know about this?" She didn't answer. "Diane, did you know?" She looked at the envelope on the table, at her name on the front of it, at the papers she was never supposed to receive first. Diane called on Thursday. Andre was at the commissary when his phone lit up with her name. He let it ring twice before he answered. Not because he was avoiding it, because he wanted to be standing still when he did. "I want to talk," she said. "In person." "All right," he said. "Somewhere neutral. Or, I don't know, somewhere we can actually speak." "The house," he said. "Saturday. 10 o'clock. A pause. He could hear her recalculating on the other end of the line, processing the fact that he had given her a location before she could suggest one. "Fine," she said. "The house." He called Curtis that evening. "Saturday morning. I need you there." "Say less," Curtis said. Saturday arrived gray and cool. Andre got to the house at 9:30. He had not slept there in 4 days. He was staying at a property he owned on the east side of the city. A clean and quiet 2-bedroom unit he had never mentioned to Diane because there had never been a reason to. He walked through the front door, set his keys on the counter, and put on a pot of coffee. Curtis arrived at 10 minutes to 10. He came in through the side door the way he always did, gave Andre one long look, and then sat down in the chair at the corner of the living room without being asked. He folded his hands in his lap. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. Diane pulled up at 3 minutes past 10. Andre watched through the window as she stepped out of her car. She was dressed sharply, fitted blazer, hair done, the full presentation. He recognized the effort for what it was. She was wearing her professional armor. This was not a woman coming to talk. This was a woman coming to negotiate. He opened the door before she could knock. "Come in," he said. She noticed Curtis immediately. Something shifted behind her eyes when she saw him. A brief tightening, quickly smoothed over. She offered a small, polite nod in Curtis's direction. Curtis looked back at her with an expression that was perfectly, deliberately blank. She turned to Andre. "I appreciate you agreeing to this," she said. Her voice was steady, practiced. "I just think there are things that need to be said. Between us. Directly." "Go ahead," Andre said. He didn't sit. He stood near the kitchen doorway, hands relaxed at his sides, weight easy on both feet. She sat on the couch. She placed her bag beside her and folded her hands the way people do when they are trying to appear calm rather than be calm. 12 years, she said. "That's not nothing, Andre. We built a life here, real things, and I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But dissolving everything because of 3 years, he said. She stopped. "Not one mistake," he said. 3 years. The air in the room shifted. She looked down briefly, then back up. She adjusted. "Whatever the timeline," she said, "it doesn't erase what we had before that. You're letting this moment define the entire marriage, and that's not fair to either of us." He said nothing. He just waited. She shifted forward slightly on the couch. Her voice dropped into something more personal, more intimate, the armor trading itself in for something softer. "We were good together," she said. "For a long time. We were really good. You know that. And what happened? It wasn't about you not being enough. You were always. You worked so hard. And I saw that. I see that. I just got lost somewhere. People get lost." Andre's face was still. "People also find their way back," she added. "I'm not interested in that conversation," he said. Her jaw moved. She smoothed her blazer and tried the third door, the one he had already seen her go through on Tuesday. "You're overreacting to this." The softness was gone now. Her voice was back to its professional register, but with something new under it, something close to irritation. "I know what this looks like. I know how you're framing it, but you're making a permanent decision over something that doesn't have to be permanent. And honestly, Andre, the way you're handling this, the papers, the attorney, all of this, is making it worse than it has to be. Nadine's office is available Monday through Friday," he said. Her mouth pressed into a line. Then she shifted her weight. Something changed in how she was sitting. It wasn't defeat. It was recalculation. She was reaching for something she had probably been holding in reserve since she walked through the door. She looked at him carefully. "You have a very complicated business structure," she said. "LLCs, property transfers, accounts Lawrence is still trying to trace." She let that sit for a moment. "There are things in how you've arranged your finances that could look a certain way to the wrong person. Things that could complicate the proceedings significantly." The room was quiet. Andre looked at her. "Be specific," he said. She held his gaze. "Which accounts?" he said. "Which transfers? Which filings? Be specific, Diane." The silence stretched. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out, because she didn't have the specific. She had the shape of a threat, the outline of it, the suggestion, but the inside was hollow. Lawrence had told her the structure was complicated. She had taken complicated and tried to build a weapon out of it, but she didn't actually know what she was holding. And now, watching Andre's face, completely still, completely unafraid, waiting with all the patience in the world, she knew that he knew that too. The threat dissolved. Right there in the living room, in real time, in front of both of them. Andre nodded slowly. "The divorce proceeds," he said. "The house goes into a structured settlement. Nadine has already outlined the terms. Lawrence will have them by end of next week." He paused. "There's nothing left to negotiate in this room." Diane stood. She picked up her bag from the couch. She smoothed her blazer one more time, though it didn't need it. She looked at Andre with an expression that had cycled all the way through its options and arrived somewhere hollow. She didn't say anything else. She walked to the front door and let herself out. Curtis didn't move until her car started. He stood up from the corner chair, crossed to the window, and watched her reverse out of the driveway. He watched her car reach the end of the block and turn. He watched until it was gone. Then he turned and looked at Andre. Andre just nodded and went inside. Scott's message came through Nadine's office on Monday. He hadn't called Andre directly. He didn't have the number. He had gone through the Verse website, found the general contact form, and left a message marked "Personal" for Mr. Wade. Nadine forwarded it to Andre with a single line of her own beneath it. "Your call. I'd advise once, public, brief." Andre read it at the commissary over lunch. He set his phone face down on the desk. He ate his food. Then he picked it back up and typed out a response through Nadine. Verse. Thursday. Noon. Thursday came in cool and bright. The city looked clean through the tall windows of the dining room, the kind of November light that made everything sharp and a little cold at the same time. Andre arrived at 11:30. He came in through the back, same as always. He checked in with the kitchen, tasted the sauce his sous chef had been adjusting all week, and told her to add 1 more minute on the reduction and back off the pepper by half. She nodded without question. He moved through the pass, spoke briefly with his floor captain, a steady young man named Reggie, who had been with Verse for 3 years, and then settled at his preferred window table in the front corner of the dining room. The table had a clean linen, a small vase with a single white stem, and a clear view of the entire room. Reggie brought him coffee without being asked. Andre sat with his jacket buttoned, unhurried, watching the street outside while the lunch service built quietly around him, servers moving with purpose, the soft clatter of the kitchen warming up, the room filling slowly with the kind of ambient energy that told you a place was cared for. This was his house. Every detail in it had come from a decision he made. Scott walked in at noon exactly. Andre watched him come through the front door, the way a man's body announces what he's trying to project before his mouth ever opens. Scott was dressed well. Dark blazer, open collar, the casual confidence of a man who had spent his whole life arriving at rooms and being received warmly. He scanned the dining room in one smooth motion, found Andre at the window, and crossed toward him with a measured stride and an easy expression. He was performing relaxed. Andre clocked it immediately. "Andre." Scott extended his hand when he reached the table. "Thanks for making time." Andre shook it. "Sit down." Scott sat. He glanced around the dining room once, just once, taking in the room in the way men do when they want to acknowledge a space without appearing impressed by it. He looked back at Andre. "This is a beautiful restaurant," he said. "Seriously." "Thank you," Andre said. Reggie appeared. Scott ordered sparkling water. Andre held up 2 fingers over his coffee cup, and Reggie disappeared to refill it. Scott settled his forearms on the table and leaned forward slightly. Not aggressively. The posture of a man who wanted to signal openness, Good faith? Reason. I'll be straight with you, Scott said. I know this situation it's not clean, and I'm not here to pretend otherwise. But I think two intelligent men can sit down and recognize when something is better handled quietly, professionally, without making it bigger than it has to be. He paused. We're both businessmen. That's the frame I want to put on this conversation. Andre listened. He did not interrupt. He did not shift in his seat. He gave Scott the full, genuine courtesy of his complete attention, the same attention he gave to every person who sat across from him in any room. Scott continued for another minute or so. He said that these things were complicated. He said that nobody set out for outcomes like this. He said that there was no reason for the professional and personal worlds to bleed into each other any more than they already had. He said he had a lot of respect for what Andre had built. He was smooth. Andre gave him that. When Scott finished, the table was quiet for a moment. The lunch service moved gently around them. A woman 2 tables over laughed at something her companion said. The kitchen produced a soft, steady rhythm behind the pass. Andre picked up his coffee cup. I appreciate you coming in, he said. His voice was even, conversational. I want to be straightforward with you as well, since that's the spirit you're bringing. Scott nodded. Earlier this week, Andre said, an anonymous tip was submitted to the state regulatory authority. Financial irregularities. Something about personal expenses being run through a development company's accounts in ways that don't hold up under scrutiny. He took a sip of coffee and set the cup down carefully. I don't know where that tip originated. These things have a way of surfacing on their own. Scott had gone very still. Andre looked at him with the same courteous expression he had worn for the entire conversation. No edge in it. No heat. Just a man stating facts at a lunch table. I hope it resolves cleanly for you, Andre said. He raised 2 fingers. Reggie materialized at the table's edge within seconds. Mr. Pritchard is ready, Andre said. Reggie nodded and gestured toward the front door with a quiet, professional grace. Right this way, sir. Scott stood. He didn't speak. His hand found the back of the chair for just a moment, a small, involuntary thing, before he steadied himself and followed Reggie toward the exit. Andre turned back to the window. He picked up his coffee and finished it alone. 18 months is a long time. Long enough for a wound to close over, not perfectly, but enough. Long enough for a man to remember what his own life felt like when it belonged entirely to him. Andre pulled up to Gwen's house at 4:30 on a Sunday, the trunk of his car loaded with 2 brown paper bags of groceries, sweet potatoes, a whole chicken, collard greens, a bunch of them, still damp from the produce stand on Meridian, a pound of butter, because Gwen's kitchen had a rule about butter that Andre had never once questioned. Curtis's truck was already in the driveway, parked at the same slight angle it had been parked at for the last 30 years. Andre carried both bags up the porch steps and didn't bother knocking. The smell hit him the moment he opened the door. Onions in a hot pan. Something sweet underneath it. Gwen had already started without them, which she always did, because waiting on other people's schedules was not something she had ever found interesting. Both bags on the counter, she called from the kitchen without turning around. Yes, ma'am. Curtis was at the kitchen table with his elbows on the wood and a glass of sweet tea in his hand, watching Gwen work with the easy satisfaction of a man who knew he was exactly where he was supposed to be. He looked up at Andre. You're 4 minutes late. Traffic. She already started the onions. I can smell that. Gwen turned from the stove then, looked Andre over once from his shoes to his face, and nodded slightly, the way she had nodded at him since he was 7 years old, when he did something that met her standard. Put the greens in the sink, she said, and wash them twice. They ate at 6. The chicken had come out perfectly, the skin golden and tight, the greens soft and seasoned all the way through the way only Gwen could manage. Andre ate more than he had intended to. Curtis ate more than that. The conversation moved the way Sunday dinner conversation always moved at Gwen's table. Slowly, without pressure, covering things that mattered, and a few things that didn't. Andre told them about the third property. The acquisition had closed 6 weeks ago. A mixed-use building 2 blocks from the commissary, ground-floor commercial space, and 4 residential units above it. Nadine had been working the deal quietly for almost a year. When it finally closed, Andre had stood in the empty ground-floor space alone for a few minutes before calling anyone. Just stood there, listening to the silence of something new. Curtis already knew about the building, but he let Andre tell it anyway. Gwen listened with her fork resting on the edge of her plate. "And the restaurant?" she asked. "Verse was in National Table last month," Andre said. "Full feature, 4 pages. Curtis pointed his fork across the table. 4 pages. I framed it." "You did not frame it." "I framed it," Curtis said. "It's in my office, right next to the window." Gwen smiled at that, small and quick, the smile she reserved for things that genuinely pleased her. Andre told her about the culinary training program. He had spent 8 months building the structure for it. Partnerships with 2 high schools in the neighborhood, a modest grant through a local foundation, and kitchen time blocked out at the commissary on Saturday mornings. The first cohort of 12 young people was set to begin in January. Kids who reminded him more than a little of the boy he used to be. He had shelved the idea early in the marriage. He couldn't remember exactly when or exactly why, only that it had slowly moved from a plan to a someday, and someday had stretched longer than he ever meant it to. It was off the shelf now. Gwen was quiet for a moment after he finished. She looked at him across the table the way she had always looked at him, not with surprise, but with a careful confirmation, like she was checking something against a measurement she had carried for years. "You look like yourself again," she said. It was 7 words. She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. Andre held that for a moment. He thought about everything the last 18 months had contained. Nadine's steady work, the settlement that landed nothing close to what Diane had calculated, the quiet erosion of Diane's professional standing in circles where her judgment used to be currency. Nobody had done that to her. Truth had done it. Truth had a way of circulating through professional communities the way water found its level. Slowly, without drama, and with absolute certainty. He thought about Scott. The regulatory investigation had cost him 2 development partners by spring. A major contract had gone to another firm in the summer. The wound wasn't fatal, but it wasn't closing either. Some things didn't. Andre hadn't lost sleep over any of it. "Yeah," he said to Gwen. "I think I do." Curtis raised his sweet tea across the table. Nothing ceremonial about it. Just a brother's acknowledgement across a dinner table on a Sunday evening. Andre raised his water glass. They touched them together quietly and went back to eating. The following Friday, Andre walked the floor of Verse at 8:30 in the evening. The dinner service was at its peak. Every table full, the room warm with conversation, the kitchen firing clean through the pass. He moved through the space without interrupting it, nodding to Reggie, pausing briefly at the bar, exchanging a few words with a regular who had been coming in since the first year. He ended up at the window table in the front corner. He stood there for a moment and looked out at the city. The November light was gone. It was darker now, colder, the street outside lit by headlights and the glow of other buildings. The city moved at its own pace, indifferent and constant. Andre thought about his grandmother's kitchen, the smell of it, the small window above the sink that looked out onto a yard that wasn't much of anything, and the way Gwen stood at that stove like she was the most anchored person on earth. The loudest dog in the yard never catches anything. He had heard that his whole life. He understood it now the way you only understand certain things after you've lived through exactly what they were preparing you for. Andre looked out at the city and smiled. Not at what he had won, not at what they had lost, at who he had never stopped being, even when the room was dark, even when he was the only one in it who knew how much he had actually built. He straightened his jacket, he turned from the window, and he went back to work. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.